All right, we're back. And today will be something of a lightning round because we're going to limit ourselves to, I guess, 45 minutes, which is what we both have available until we have other things to do. I'm
Hmm.
Ben Brazzelli,
I'm
joined
Kyle Godby. We're working with constraints today.
by some governing and enabling constraints, hopefully. So, one of our little stickies is about scarcity versus abundance. And you started, Kyle, before we hit record to kind of say some things. So maybe, do you want to just pick up where you were and we can launch in?
Yeah, absolutely. And it works perfectly for our limited time today and how
Yeah.
we're going to respond to that. How things are going to be maybe a little less tangential. Um, yeah,
Think so?
well, who knows?
I wouldn't
Well,
be so confident.
there will always, I feel like this is a great way to move into it. Depending on that level of stress, there's somebody in the room that's sort of monitoring for that thing usually. Like, can we get back on topic? Can we focus? Can we not screw around with all this? I want to put more post-its on the board. Can we just pick one and go? um, I I've been trying to think of ways to understand my stakeholders and audience in a different way, in a more relatable way, in a more favorable way, rather than a just, nobody wants to cooperate. No, everyone's just locked into their draconian mindset, that kind of stuff. Too dismissive for me.
Yes.
And I fell into that trap early,
Mhm.
and wanted to like place myself outside of that and then figure out how do I negotiate that. But again, getting into that dualist mindset. Oh, here we go with mindsets. The sort of recognizing a binary there.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't work for me anymore, and so um, I've been sensitive lately to the situations we find ourselves in where there is abundance versus scarcity, and obviously not another binary, but gradients in that space. And it's
Sounds
not.
binary to me, Kyle.
It is definitely a binary, the way that our language is going to
It
put
could
it. But
be, like you said, a spectrum, a polarity that we can play with,
yeah,
like etc.
and
Which, yeah, you mentioned not a mindset, but maybe also a mindset. But we'll come back to that. So keep going.
fair enough. But when there's two of us in the room, then it can be that binary, sure. But when it's eight people in a room,
Yeah.
everyone's feeling that a little bit differently. And scarcity of what is also a really good question.
Yeah.
This person's job is on the line because they're committed to delivering something. This person's time is on the line because they've got five different things and they're
Right.
only allocating X. So again, not true binary of scarcity is one thing to all people,
Yeah.
but I I've been thinking about this in terms of when the right time to introduce some new things, introduce risky things, ask people to take leaps of faith or play or anything along these lines. Being sensitive to whether or not they seem to be acting as if there is a scarcity of something, and they're under pressure. That's usually when I get called into things. My hair's on fire. Can you come put it out? The house is burning down. It's, figure this out. And so the first thing I want to do is say, well, that's not the way we should do it. We should probably do it this way instead. And they're like, ah,
We don't have
total
time to
panic.
play with Legos. The house is on fire. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Who does that? And, be a professional. Um, but so kind of sure, I'll put together your journey map here, and I'll show you how the house is on fire, or we'll do swim lanes. But also let that sort of sit in. People will often find, well, this swim lane is not representative of the thing that I'm dealing with. Like,
Yeah.
this is a good start. Cool. Maybe that unlocked something. That's progress. And
Yep.
so I think we need to find those wins when they're available.
Yeah.
So that's when I'm thinking about scarcity and abundance now. And the other side of that being the abundance, the way I think about that is, the warm data conversation comes up a lot. When are we going to introduce warm data into a large organization? Is that even possible? Well, sure. We put aside at the beginning of like a 3-day workshop 2 hours of team building stuff. We don't have to call it warm data. We don't have to teach everybody
Yeah.
the word semathesy and explain what it is. We're doing team building. I'm going to tell a story, and then you're going to go into groups and see what arises for you. Have some context. Maybe that'll like conversation starters. That I've done that a few times, not with warm data specifically, but some of the activities, frameworks, methods that we've used. where I've introduced it in. We're planning for lunch for this event. I did that at one point where it was something like an estuarian map for great. How do we do that? I've introduced adjacent possible as icebreakers, just to get people kind of their gears moving, and the result is usually the same. It is, I've never seen anything like this before, or this is a really interesting way to go about this. I wonder if we could use this here. And that's the big aha for me, is when I see those. That's what I want to happen when I walk in the room and someone says, the house is on fire. What do we need? And I go, we're going to ecosystem map this and do narrative research. And, I want them to go, interesting. I wonder what that would do to the house on fire at the moment. Let's tell stories about the house that is currently burning down, and, find our clusters and vectors and weak signals. And that's the wish, but it's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, there's a question to be had. Is that even the right? I mean, truly, when things are on fire, those might not be the right approaches anyway, right? If we want to if we want to honor the spirit of, like, say, the Kinevin framework or something. But I think you and I both know someone's sense that something is on fire is sometimes manufactured and is not, if really given the opportunity to think about, like, from an ontological perspective, do I actually think this is a chaotic system or domain? No.
Sure.
Anyway, I love this. I love all of this because I don't actually, it's funny, like the concept of scarcity versus abundance. And I feel like it had a moment in the last couple of years. Maybe I'm wrong, but it was always tied to the word mindset, right? I mean, I'm sure there were some pop books about it, right? I'm trying to think of the woman. It's a woman. Anyway, it doesn't matter because I've kept that at arm's length, and probably you have too. And because whenever it's associated with the mindset, the message is you can't and shouldn't operate with a scarcity mindset. It holds you back. Right. It limits your ability to both see and interrogate the world you're in, the assumptions you're operating on. It narrows your focus in a way that good things are going to pass you right by. You can talk about it from a business perspective. You can talk about it from a personal growth, development perspective. But so much of that is tied to the individual, and you and I, everyone listening to this by now should know how we think about that. But to think about actual times of scarcity or abundance, so taking it away from an individual mindset operating with a scarcity mindset, and instead ask, what is the context version of that? Right. What are the environments or contexts or conditions in which there is perceived scarcity? It doesn't matter if that scarcity is real or not. But in those contexts, to your point, if the pattern has been, entrained that I don't have time, we don't have time. It doesn't matter whether they literally have time or not. It is simply that their environment is built to say there isn't time. So nothing we can do is going to get that to change until we start to work together in other ways. So I think the reframe here for anyone listening who's like, yeah, I'm familiar with scarcity and abundance. I think right off the bat, drop the mindset word because that ain't it. And now thinking about what does it mean to try to get people into a collaborative and playful space when they are experiencing some kind of scarcity. And, we're talking a little bit more about organizational and community scarcity here rather than literal, like, resource scarcity, which is its own bigger, headier topic. But I guess it could apply in some ways to that as well. Sure. I find that, we joked earlier, it's a binary. Yes, everybody is both. But it's really useful to even interrogate, like, who feels what when. So I don't know if you ever do this in, like, a workshop or any kind of collaborative setting, but even just asking people, perhaps as part of, like, the warm up or the get ready part or the icebreaker part, where they might place themselves on a scale of some kind in this moment about this topic, here right now in this org. And I've done this with lots of other things. I've never thought to do this with literally the words scarcity and abundance, putting, like, just on a scale, we are currently operating in scarcity or abundance, and leaving it relatively open-ended and oblique, and have people identify, which of those they feel personally that they identify with or that they feel they have. Personally, I'm working with scarcity, even if my colleagues have an abundance of whatever, and then ask them to talk about it. But I have done it with like the convergent and divergent, because that's one that I find people also are willing to talk about. And maybe it's a little easier that it doesn't come part and parcel with the mindset thing, although this has me really rethinking some of this. But I've often found, if you talk about like the double diamond or whatever, forget, we've covered that one. But just take
Yep.
out of that the notion of convergence and divergence, and as you mentioned earlier, we're
Sure.
often trying to avoid premature convergence. But I do think people, because of whatever, the entangled like interaction of like all of the constraints and patterns and organizational dynamics in any given point in time, are more comfortable in one mode or the other. I don't think it's innate to the human. I think in a different environment, that person can be any number of things. But in a moment, in a workshop, I've had people identify, are you trying to diverge? Is it more important to you right now that you diverge, or is it more important that you converge? Are you finding yourself really nervous about this motion? We have to diverge first, or are you really excited to take the time to do that? And then
Mm-hmm.
later, is it really important that we converge on something, or does that part make you feel icky? And interestingly, people can then talk about it. It's not like, oh, I just feel this way. If you get people in a room to stand up along a wall and see where they land, they're
Mm-hmm.
surprised by each other. The people at the
Yeah.
divergent end are like, you think they're going to just be like, aha, of course, you guys always want to converge and get moving. And we're the ones over here that always want to daydream first. But no, in reality, there are always surprises. And that generates really good conversation. But I
Yeah.
find that that's a topic that is at far less risk of being associated with like an innate personality trait versus the way that like scarcity mindset and abundance mindset have been kind of popularized, right, in like the
Sure.
mainstream media. But it's definitely interesting. It's got me thinking like what, that kind of activity in a similar way, but with who in this room, like where do you feel this challenge lives? What is the, where are we at from scarcity to abundance? Because
Mm-hmm.
even acknowledging, if everybody is like, we have nowhere near the resources we need, time, energy, people, whatever, even just like naming it can really go such a
Yeah.
way. And then we all agree it's not ideal, but
Right.
now we recognize there are some things we can play with and sneak in like pockets of what should be, how we operate, not just in times of abundance.
Right. There's a physiological component to this as well.
Of
That
course.
now, and I keep, I'm dodging a lot of the somatics conversations just because
Yeah.
I don't need to spend that much time doing deep breathing on these calls. I kind of just want to get in and learn. But there's a lot of like, what are your hands doing right now in those conversations? And I'm saying this more as in a self criticism that I probably need to be more patient with that, because more and more I'm saying I see where this fits in, and I wish I knew more about this, and I need to be more sensitive to this. What you were just talking about reminded me of a journey map that I did with somebody, a team a while ago, when we were trying to figure out onboarding and how onboarding went for a group of people. And rather than like the smiley face emojis and the frowns and that kind of stuff on
Mhm.
the y-axis, um, I put in, when were you getting your hits of dopamine versus your cortisol hits? And that was our spectrum. And they thought it was hilarious. And they were so freely saying that's definitely a stress moment. Cortisol was high at that moment.
Yeah.
And this was rewarding. This was the oxytocin, even, it was
Yeah.
peaking with the oxytocin, but the dopamine was, this one, which was kind of mediocre. But
Yeah.
uh, the people are sensitive to these sort of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love the idea of just out and asking. I don't know if you kind of say like, what's your serotonin or your dopamine level at the moment?
Yeah.
I don't know that anyone's going to be able to answer that necessarily.
Yeah.
Scarcity and abundance might be it, but there's probably a more oblique,
Right. I probably wouldn't
craftful.
use those words, maybe with some teams.
Yeah,
Some
but that's
teams,
the idea.
yeah. Yeah. But you make such a good point about it. I mean, the other thing is when you hear the word scarcity, like even just right now, we talk about scarcity in this conversation, and
Mm-hmm.
the word scarcity just evokes, batten down the hatches, hold on to what you have, hoard,
Yeah.
protect, gatekeep. And there's a huge conversation to be had about the ways that organizations perpetuate that feeling. So,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't want to. I'm like looking at the clock. I'm like, no, okay, no. We'll just look in that room and then we'll keep going down the hall. But, but I do think just even where most people want to take this is A, the mindset stuff, or B, just that there have been patterns built even through childhood or through trauma, or
Mm-hmm.
through even just this current job. But the last 5 years of this job has instilled in me a constant like scarcity, sense of
Mm-hmm.
scarcity. There's never enough. We don't have time to be playful. And so it's got me also thinking about, if you're working with people, not just the value of getting people to think about and acknowledge what the context they're in feels like, not with any
Mm-hmm.
expectation that we're going to change, because it'll change on its own. The context will change because things change over time. The humans will change because people change over time. But that's going
Yeah.
to happen as a result of our collaboration, right? And things will continue to emerge. But it also gets me thinking about just the acknowledgement of the like physical impact, to your point about somatics, and
Mm-hmm.
to say, we are actually limiting ourselves, or we have a role in perpetuating this like for each other. So I am
Mm.
feeling in this environment that we're trying to engage in right now to solve this challenge or explore this question or whatever it is, put out this fire. It's a chance to say I feel intense scarcity here, and to hear if somebody else says I actually think there's more abundance than you guys are. I see more abundance than you guys do.
Right.
And just to hear the way that there are differences, and to know that if you are constantly operating in that way, you are
Mm-hmm.
modeling for others that is the scenario. We read each other to make sense of the environment that we're in. So we don't just,
Yeah.
take in the facts. We read each other's responses, just in the way that, like, this is totally random, but like when I was really little, I remember kind of reading how concerned about I should be about a situation by looking at like the adults around me, right? I think that's what children do, right? Like I don't know whether to be
Mm-hmm.
scared or not unless my parents are scared, or I fall and skin my knee. I don't know whether to cry or not until I see if my mom goes, let me kiss it, it's fine. Or, oh my
Right.
God, are you okay? And then you start
Yeah.
bawling. And so
Right.
I don't think people recognize that this continues to happen in adulthood and in organizational professional settings. So if everybody's running around with the intense kind of sense that there's not enough, fill in the blank, you are literally making available for others to read that that's how they should also be feeling. And again, I know that's probably where the spirit of the like mindset stuff comes in, but
Right.
again, put the innate trait stuff away and
Yeah.
think about that fact.
Yeah. And what you were just saying, I like we know that I think we've talked about this before about the benefit of constraints.
Hmm.
The the idea that scarcity is a bad thing
Yeah.
is also misdirected, and abundance is a good thing, also totally misdirected. How, like, we know about paradox of choice.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, we've brought everybody together. We've got 2 days. We've got this massive room that we can do this big workshop. That's stressful. You've invested a lot into this space. We are overwhelmed with excess and abundance. That creates a lot of stress, and that I
Right.
better be able to deliver. I better be able to show somebody their money's worth
Yeah.
for bringing this all together. Your time traveling is going to be beneficial because of this. Where we can go back to music and Delta blues and scarcity and old punk and all of that all day long, but that being able to reframe scarcity in terms of time
Yeah.
is just great. What do you have access to do, and how do you walk out of the room doing this? And I think that's actually a lot of what we try to play around with affordance mapping
Yeah.
is, in the next 2 weeks with your level of agency, what can you accomplish? Let's try that.
Yeah.
Anything beyond that is good to recognize that it's beyond that, but that's not our plan walking out of the room.
Yeah. Well,
So
and
acknowledging,
yeah, I mean, I think
well,
most people, if you really give
great.
them a chance to think about it, like in a kind of safe place, or a way where there's not a right answer, I think most people can see that having a completely wide open, unconstrained access to time or whatever you need. I mean, if you've ever actually truly experienced that, raise your hand. Okay. And then, or the
Right.
closest you've ever gotten to it, how did it go for you?
Right.
Like, I'm willing to bet right now, and I'll probably regret this, but if anybody listening to this can actually name a time where they just had like completely open, unconstrained, unfettered, no expectations, like what you would probably say the sort of impossible extreme version of abundance, um, how did it go? Did you accomplish something amazing? Did you enjoy yourself beyond all possibility? Like, how did it go? Because for all the reasons you're saying, the level of
Mm-hmm.
um, I think the level of assessment we apply to these are a little unequal. I think we pay a lot more attention to how stressful it feels to feel like you're operating in scarcity. And we
Mm-hmm.
pay so much attention to how much we just wish we had more space, time,
Right.
etc. But this isn't about to be like, again, this gets into like gratitude and, I should be thankful for what I have and the abundance and things will manifest as needed and like whatever. But I think really giving people a chance to acknowledge kind of the reverse of each of those things. Times where having to make do with less, which is a charged statement now because so many organizations weaponize that and they
Yeah.
weaponize the concept of creativity against people. It is, a form of like institutional trauma or betrayal or whatever extreme phrases you want to use. So like I totally acknowledge that. But putting
Mm-hmm.
that aside, think about the times where having to kind of figure something out that was imperfect generated some novel stuff or something really unique or powerful in a way that wouldn't have happened if you just been given carte blanche or no leash. And that's where I think a lot of organizations from like, now this is Jen the consultant speaking, they're so close but they're missing it. They don't see
Mm-hmm.
that a little bit of scaffolding, a little bit of those enabling constraints, but then giving people the ability to pull from things, get creative in the real sense, use their exaptive, kind of like innovative thinking and skill, borrowing ideas from things that have worked elsewhere but now are applying. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where innovation happens. But I think it's really easy to look past this and just say, we'll just make do with less, and then everybody battens down the hatches. And I have to say too, at this point in like 2026, where it feels like everybody I talk to just feels like there's not enough of anything, everything sucks. I don't believe
Right.
that's true, right? Everywhere, all the
Yeah.
time. But I feel like it's definitely becoming a bit of like a narrative assemblage in the like wider working world that we're all going to get
Sure.
sucked down into here is that everything is bad, everything is not enough. And there are lots of places and ways where that's true. But how much starts to happen where if you take a kid who grows up without much, without much
Mm-hmm.
resources or whatever, you learn to scrounge and scrap for every last thing. You protect stuff. You anticipate having things challenged or be taken away from you. This is where you get into childhood trauma and all that. And later in life, you have to kind of figure maybe some of those patterns and coping mechanisms and tools are not so purpose fit to my life in the adult world these days. But we don't really do a good job of that in the organizational setting. Someone can go
Yeah.
through 5 years working in a company that instills the same level of expectation, and then something changes, the environment, the context, maybe they change companies, but that person's literally
Mm-hmm.
like someone walking in who grew up in poverty but in the organizational sense, so they might not recognize that there are ways to be playful and innovative and solving really meaningful challenges inside an organization even when you don't have what you imagine abundance would look like.
Yeah. And it's when we talk about fresh eyes a lot, we're talking about people that are approaching without the same definition of those constraints. And so they don't know that this thing has been tried over and over again and it's failed. So they're approaching that as if
Yeah.
it's greenfield. I've got a brand new idea, everybody. Let's go at it. But they're coming into it from the context of the immediate moment. And
Mm-hmm.
so give them the space to do that. Absolutely. I I was reminded of when I get making music, when I get a bit of writer's block, because I've got a whole bunch of software downloaded and I've got I basically almost anything accessible. And as a sound designer, if I don't have access to it, I'll make it. So like I feel abundance, but I get overwhelmed by that. So the way I break it is I try to make some synthwave. And what's specific about synthwave is that there are only so many emulators you can use. You're going to emulate these 4 drum machines or these 5 keyboards, these 10 keyboards or something. You've got access to like 3 effects. And these techniques were not available in 1984.
Yeah.
And so what would John Carpenter do is kind of the question. And having to like self-impose those constraints, I hear artists talk about this all the time when you go into art studio and someone says, here's a piece of broken glass. That's it. Do it.
Yeah.
And that's enough. That's incredible constraint is
Yeah.
what kind of allows us to sort through that abundance and make sense of it and connect it to something more tangible to move
Yeah.
through it. So sometimes we want to introduce scarcity when there is this abundance. The
So
answer is not how do we get more.
yeah, there's like three things that just are swirling in my head right now. One is drumming. I'll come back to that. But
Mm-hmm.
another is the title of this that abundance is overrated. Is that a main idea? Um,
Yeah.
but I do think we should probably acknowledge also this is full. This entire episode is full of like acknowledgments that we know it's actually shitty out there. Sorry, guys,
Right.
but
Yep.
but we're talking about scarcity as an enabling constraint. It's not always that, right? So, like, okay,
Right.
but like it can be. So, we're not saying
Right.
those of you who are literally being asked to do crazy amounts of work in a completely toxic environment, why aren't you just doing some exaptive
Right.
innovation? So
Yeah.
like,
Turn that frown upside down.
but I do. This is partly why we both were like, yeah, this is a good topic for today because I have almost literally just taken the concept of scarcity and abundance and throw them on a shelf and never think about them because I just think about them in the way people talk about scarcity mindset and abundance mindset. And I like taking them back down off the shelf and be like, no, actually, there's something here. And so
Mm-hmm.
scarcity, whether manufactured by the machinations of capitalism or just scarcity as an organic result of things being interactive and entangled and it's just the environment you find yourself in, each case can still in some scenarios have the power to serve as an enabling constraint, not unlike what you just said, when making music. And of course, I
Mm-hmm.
thought as you were chatting about Brian Eno's oblique strategies, which if
Mm-hmm.
y'all aren't familiar with it, just go Google it, but it's a lovely little card set toolkit, however you want to think about it. And I don't know that I would always think of them as enabling constraints, but they're basically a series of prompts
Yep.
that just encourage you to do a thing, try a thing, whatever. And they're all very oblique on purpose. So for any of the complexity folks that are into that and have never heard of Brian Eno's, and I think Peter Schmidt, they did it together, but oblique
Mm-hmm.
methods, or approaches or strategies, oblique strategies, that's what it said. But
That's it.
so
Yep.
I think anybody who came up through a studio culture too, like you mentioned, artists, designers, anybody who in school has a studio setting knows the importance of enabling constraints really well. But I don't think it even has to just be in creative scenarios. So I thought I would bring this up
Mm-hmm.
because as soon as you said music, I thought about how I play the drums.
Mm-hmm.
I continue to say I'm learning to play the drums. It's been a couple years now, but I'm still barely like an intermediate level drummer. I just play by myself. I go in the basement. I put on some music. I'll do a couple drills. I'll do some rudiments. I'll do the things that I know that I should practice.
Playing Neil Peart.
But not always, because sometimes I don't feel like doing that, and I'm not taking active lessons anymore. I took lessons for about a year, and then my schedule got busy, and I was like, yeah, this is good enough for me to just play along. But there are times where I like don't have anything specific, and having the instructor give you that, as homework was one thing.
Yep.
Or sometimes it's like have your boss telling you what to do, right? But putting that aside, it's just me and the drums. So there are times where I don't go downstairs to play the drums for like days at a time because I'm in a place where it's just wide open. I might have an abundance
Mm-hmm.
of time and I have all the tech and the music and I got YouTube and I can figure out how to play something if I want. I can get a virtual like tutorial, whatever. Like I got everything at my disposal and I don't go downstairs. But
Right.
then there'll be something that I come across or something that just creates like the seed of something. And I often think about it as the seed of something. But in this case, I also think it's a form of scarcity where there's suddenly like, you can only go play the drums, but you've only got like an hour before we're leaving. Or, okay, you want to learn this song, but you can't play it right because you don't have all the right drums or cymbals, but you've been
Mm-hmm.
hearing it a lot and you're kind of intrigued by it. So what if you challenge yourself to figure out how to get as close as you can with, only a couple drums and cymbals and not like a full giant kit. And so
Yeah.
if something sparks in me the challenge of try to do this thing, acknowledging right up front, I won't be perfect. I may not succeed at
Mm-hmm.
all. It's limited, and it's not just limited by my own lack of skill and expertise or practice or whatever. It's also limited by my environment. The minute I'm like, I'm limited by my environment is like so weirdly freeing to then just go fuck around.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So I'm not
Yeah.
creating new music, but it's the same idea. as you were
Hmm.
saying, like when someone gets writer's block or whatever. And I just was like, huh,
Hmm.
interesting. Never would have thought about that as scarcity. I think it's a bit of a reach to make that connection, but it's at the same kind of angle as
Right.
having lack of the abundance you might think you need to make something feel really good.
Yeah. Well, we both write articles from time to time. To me, the worst approach to that is to just hit the new button on Substack and get the plain white page with the
Worst.
flashing cursor,
Worst.
and then just frozen, and I got nothing. And I will maybe start something, and immediately I'm like, this sucks. The stuff that works is when I've got all my scratch notes and they hit this critical mass where I'm like, all right, I have to
Yes.
get them off of the post-it notes because there's a horrible mess here. Let's push it in there. So strain is another component to
Yes.
this that traverses both abundance and
Yes.
scarcity that I love. I think I initially got kicked off through this because my son's 6 now, and the toddlers have the sort of, can I have the candy for dinner kind of thing, which we don't keep candy in the house really, but can I have something not for dinner? And the answer is no, and immediately it's like a full meltdown, and you
Yeah.
kind of want to go, come on, you got to grow up past that. But physiologically, they have this immature connection to uh, it, everything appears to be a threat, and so everything is going to drive me into a flight or flight fawn sort of response.
Yep.
And so
Okay, so we had a little tech issue, but we're back.
we're
And
back.
you were telling a story about your son wanting candy before dinner.
Right. Or something not dinner for dinner and
Yeah,
then
you mentioned you don't keep
collapsing.
candy in the house, and I'm fighting all
No.
of my urge to have that conversation, but we will talk about that another time.
I mean, not regularly. I'm not saying that they're not allowed candy, but it's,
Ugh, raising
there's
your
like that.
children in a scarcity world, whereas I grew up in an abundant household with
Right.
candy in every. Anyway, go ahead.
That's kind of it too, is how do we make this not like yes. How do we not drive that
I came
scarcity
out
so that,
fine. What are you
sure.
implying?
So I had the same abundance. Um, so yeah, so he wants ice cream for dinner, whatever.
Yeah.
But the answer no means full on meltdown and kicking the floor. And,
Mhm.
what by acknowledging that he's gone into this fight, flight, fawn, my response can't be to like, okay, push through, get up, like,
Yeah.
there are times that I'm like, I'm in like intense driving. Traffic is awful. Shit's going haywire, especially in the mid Atlantic. We love that. And there's somebody in the car going, why don't you just move? And I'm like, shut like, not now. And I've gone
Yes.
into that mode now. And
Hmm.
it doesn't happen as often,
Yeah.
as a 6-year-old. That's because our brains are developed differently by the time you're my age. But the answer is still not to like, let's reason through this.
Right.
Let me show you the data that says
Just talk
you
my nervous
shouldn't be
system
there.
off this ledge. Why don't you?
That's it.
Yes. Great.
Right. It really is to like dim the lights, quiet things down, reduce the stimuli a little bit, and let him go through his thing, process it,
Yeah.
and then recover. And as long as he's like not hitting his sister or breaking
Yeah.
shit, then
Yeah.
great. So the moment that I started trying that and finding, wow, this actually works, he kind of like, he has the ability to recover, and there's a good learning in that too. And so I'll just sit back and kind of wait for that and make the space for that. Now I started to bring that in and thinking about my stakeholders that way, or the people I'm talking to about, hey, want to
Yeah.
try something new? As they're probably not full on, pull your dress over your head, fight, flight, fawn kind of stuff, but
Yeah.
There's something, there's enough momentum there that says I gotta not change the environment, but what can I do that is not perpendicular
Yeah.
to the state that they're in right now,
Yes.
and still be
Yeah.
supported. The other part of it, and we've said this 100 times, you still want to put yourself in a position where somebody calls you up and says, I need your help with this.
That's right.
If they're saying like, I'm drowning here. Can you please throw me the thing? And you're like, well, that's not going to be really
Like that
sufficient.
cartoon where
They're
it's like just
never going to, right. You throw them the anvil. Yeah. Like, can you throw me the anvil? And you're like, well, let me explain to you how anvils work. They're never going to ask you for help again. The person that throws them exactly what they want is the person they're going to call the next time around. And
yeah.
so that's, now I'm not saying like we need to just satisfy every whim.
No.
We are all
Nope.
adults here at the end of the day.
Yep.
It's a little different with toddlers, but even with toddlers, you don't just kind of let them
No.
rule the situation. But um, yeah, how do you put yourself in that position where you are supportive without enabling while also guiding?
I mean, I think that is one of the most nuanced and like artful, built through experience, built through exposure to lots of different environments and clients and scenarios, humans.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's one of the hardest things to learn, I find, especially from my days leading a small agency and doing hiring and things. It's not
Yeah.
just soft skills, it's beyond that, and it takes time. And I think um, I appreciated what you didn't do in this part of the conversation is, I half expected you to say something about regulation or like dysregulation of the nervous
Right.
system. And yes, those things are true for individuals on certain individual levels. But, you get into the workplace and I get so itchy and so a little, well, more than a little apprehensive about pulling in the language of things like dysregulated nervous systems in the
Mm-hmm.
workplace, the therapizing therapy speak kind
Right.
of being sometimes innocently, but more often than not, like deliberately kind of weaponized and or
Yeah.
misconstrued or operationalized by people who might even mean well, but are doing a disservice to everybody involved, including actual therapists and the people they're collaborating with. So I appreciate the lack of that in what you were saying. But to
Mm-hmm.
that end, there's something that is like on a parallel with that is not literally about nervous systems. But if you want to be somewhat metaphorical, instead of the individual and their nervous system, you're thinking about a group of people as an
Mm-hmm.
organism. And that
Mm-hmm.
group of people does still have the kind of things that they trust each other and don't trust each other to do together, the kind of actions and decisions that they do or don't have the rights or the trust to make with each other. And that is the kind of metaphorical nervous system, which, God, I'm going to regret even saying any of this. Please, nobody say that Jen's talking about the nerve.
Metaphorical nervous system. Love it.
It's just, but getting into an organization as either an outside consultant or as a person who's working inside the organization and simply just being of it enough
Mm-hmm.
that, of course, to get that trust in the first place, you do have to show I do hear your needs. I can help you with your needs. You might
Yeah.
think that the solution to those needs right now is exactly XYZ. I might know better, which also is a pretty problematic stance to even have. So, like, fuck that. But I
Right.
might have an inkling of where this will go if I just give you XYZ. But because I have done this a lot of times, I have the patience to know that if I
Mm-hmm.
could come in with XYZ and at the same time earn your trust and we have each other's benefit, in our as our goal, then
Mm-hmm.
I can also over time find those opportunities, as you and I always talk about, to say, here is some other thing, here is some other practice, here is some other way we might engage with each other that maybe does what XYZ did that other time, but now does it
Mm-hmm.
even better. But like, you just can't come in right that way with the beginning. And I think a lot of folks struggle because it feels like that initial trust building period is somehow betraying your own values or doing something that isn't in, that person's best interest. And I get it. It's sometimes it's almost like a doctor betraying the Hippocratic oath, but like,
Mm-hmm.
let's get real, people. Like, we're not talking about coming in and just doing what a team asks you to do.
Right.
Everybody else's well-being be damned. Like, don't do that. Don't be unethical. But
Yeah.
more often than not, that gray zone is huge. It's
Oh
huge. And
yeah.
you don't have to betray your values. You don't have to betray the do no harm concept, but just to say, yes, you want me to make 16 blueprints, one for each archetype of an organization you work with. I have a feeling that's not going to serve your needs. But what I am going to do is say, I am going to come in with the intention of making 16 blueprints, but let's carve some space into this interaction such that
Mm-hmm.
if cooler or better or more effective actually emerges as we work together, maybe we'll do that too.
Yeah.
It's all it takes sometimes, she
the
says,
the
planning a project where she might have to make 16.
well, even the notion of like, I feel like I know where this goes.
Yeah.
My kids have been teaching me this because
Yeah.
I
Let's
grew up with the
drop
like,
that.
you're gonna break your neck if you do that. Don't run with that pencil. You're gonna stab your eye out.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Like the hyperbole of danger,
Yeah.
and I have to unparent that. But I'm it's like the first thing, my first instinct when the kids are like jumping on the couch, or now they're trying to like or whatever. There's something that I'm like looking at that and I'm going, it's going to be that. And the few times that I've actually called that out, there are a few times where I'm like, yep, it happened, and that's because I know a thing or two about. I've been around
Yeah.
for a minute. There
Yeah.
are other times that I call it out. Nothing bad happens,
Yeah.
and they turn around and look at me and like, see, I told you, and I have
I
to
love
do
it.
the.
You've got to
All
do
right,
that
you were
as a
right.
yes. If you are in any kind of complexity informed practice whatsoever, you have to let go of that. Like, I've seen this before. I know what's going to happen. It's
Yeah,
ingrained in you, and you probably don't even realize how internalized it is. And like, it's the one place where I'll say, go do some inner work. Sometimes the result is not to say to a client, don't do that. You're going to hurt yourself. It might just be, I don't think you're going to kill yourself. If you do that, that could be dangerous. I'm going to dial 911 on my phone just to be ready.
right.
And that's
That's
my
it.
job.
Yeah, if this starts to happen, that means we're about to go off the cliff. If there are
Yes.
no more trees, we're about
Yes.
to go into something
That's
terrible.
right.
So
On that note,
keep, yeah,
now we're both about to go off the cliff through the trees. We got to be done. I know.
that's
Um,
yeah, the swamp.
yeah, this was good. Nice little, like I said, nice little lightning round for the people. A
We
mere
need
40 minutes
to
or whatever.
introduce this constraints every once in a while to keep us this concise and yeah,
Perfect. All
excellent.
right. Well, on that note, we'll call it a day
There we
here.
go.